What's going on, everybody? This is Pastor Paul, and I'm hanging out with Amber. And a few weeks ago, Amber did an incredible message. And we completely goofed and messed up really bad and didn't record it. And we have paid the price for that. And so many of you have called us, emailed, and texted, and Facebooked us. Wanting more information, more content, resources. So I just figured that I would sit down with Amber and we would just have a conversation about her message and maybe even some extra content that we didn't get to talk about on that Sunday. Her message title was "Every Story Has a Hero." And so Amber, hi.
Hi. This is so exciting.
Yes, it's very cool. So
I've never done a podcast before, and I feel like this is something might stick.
We have some really great conversations, don't we, Amber?
We do.
And they're normally in back rooms just like this.
Yes.
And so we just wanted everybody to kind of join in with us. And so tell us a little bit about the message, where it came from, maybe some places in your heart. And also, why Joseph?
Yeah, so I think for me, this comes truly out of my life, where I can just look back and see the hand of God always there, always doing something, even if it's in situations that I haven't entirely loved or liked or thought were what I would have done if I was God, as we all think.
Yeah.
But then I also spent a week with my goddaughters, about a week before that, and just their struggle with, why do all these things happen to us? Why is this in my life? And what is it really all about? And trying to tell them that, there's always a greater good that's out there. And then, the other part of it that I did not share on Sunday was I have a friend who, just like Joseph, sits in jail, wrongfully accused, and still knowing that this is like his assignment, that God put him here, and so he's making the best of it, and he's missing out on years with his children, but he is like this shining light of just one of the first people I remember talking to over the phone after my husband died was him, who called, and I just remember saying, I think I'm starting to understand the sovereignty of God. Right. And so all of that to say, why wouldn't we talk about it as a superpower?
Yeah, and we've been in this series called The Incredibles, and so this is where it all kind of started bubbling out, and that we think that there are these people in the Bible, and they're very much like us. We
forget that.
Sometimes we separate. We say, wow, Joseph was this like superhuman type guy, and yet when we really dig into the story, like he has some feelings that we can appreciate and identify with. And so you chose Genesis 50:20 just to kind of be like a kind of a jumping off point, and that says, "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring about this present result, to preserve many people alive." Like, this is an incredible moment where he kind of gets some clarity about this whole reason why he's in the predicament that he's in.
30 years of life, multiple chapters in Genesis later, he can make this, declaration. I think we forget that.
Yeah, and
we read through it, chapter by chapter, as it's like a moment. It happened so quickly, but for Joseph, it was a lifetime getting to this resolve that at the end of the end, when he's standing in front of his brothers, can say, you meant all this for good, all this for bad, but God meant it for good, that I could save others.
So you begin kind of with the end in mind here, where we're like, that's where all of us want to be. Like, I don't know about, everyone out there, but like, I want to be in a place where I can say all the bad things in my life, God used in some way for good, and not just my good. I think sometimes we confuse that. And that's one of the things, like, as you're speaking, I'm back there saying, like, is this all supposed to be for my good, or is it for the good? And as the end of, Genesis 50:20 right here is like, wow, you preserved, like, many people. Like, you changed other people's lives. Like, you changed the course of history for so many people using my story and using all this mess that I went through. And now we're looking back, thousands of years later, we're looking back at the same story and saying, wow, God, am I in the same situation?
I think, too, what's interesting to always know, too, is that Joseph lived this life day by day not knowing the outcome. So now that we are where we are in the 21st century and we've read it, and, for some of us in the church, we've read it multiple times, taught it to children, see it on the movie screen, see it in a cartoon, whatever we've done to this great epic story, we know the ending. But Joseph didn't know the ending. He lived every moment, hardship, excruciating pain in the process every day without knowing that at the end he'd be, prime minister of Egypt and saving his brothers who threw him in a pit to begin with.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure just some highlights here of David, of Joseph's life. Yeah, David, I don't know why I said that. But he's betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, probably. It's pretty sure he's not going to get out of there. He's probably in there saying his last, wishes and last prayers. And then he gets sold into slavery, which is even probably worse.
2 times.
Twice, yes.
To the Midianites, and then the Midianites sell him to Potiphar.
Yeah, so
in Egypt.
And it's getting ready to be football season. So this guy, I was just thinking that he's not
a draft pick.
He's not a number 1 draft pick. he's literally. And I guess sometimes I look at Joseph and I'm like, man, he's got some qualities that I might want, but literally he's passed over so many times.
Even in that, though he went from, a place of like favoritism from his father, a boy who had great fashion sense because of his robe, like some great things, even selling him into slavery was still better than what some of his brothers wanted to kill him.
Yeah.
So like even then a decision could have easily changed his course to something totally different, but the fact that he was sold was still part of the plan.
It's bad that the best option on the table here is like slavery or dying in a pit,
right,
or being killed by your own brother.
Right.
Wow. And so he's in slavery. He's accused of doing something like super horrible, and we talked about it. You addressed it.
Mm-hmm.
Rape. Being accused of rape, being accused of just an unspeakable thing, and it's something that is also, something that we can identify with, being falsely accused for things, especially in the day and age where it just takes somebody sending a tweet, somebody sending a post, and I just know the horror of like the times that my account's been hacked, and like something goes out, and you think, oh my goodness, these accusations are going to come to me and they're completely false. And so there's an accusation of this, and of course he doesn't get the benefit of the doubt again. Mm-mm. And he gets thrown into jail. And then while he's in jail, he just pleads with those people around him, just remember me, the baker, the candlestick maker. I don't know. I thought that when you and the cupbearer, all these people from I guess different nursery rhymes are in there, and they're his cellmates are the people serving there, and he just wants to be remembered. He wants his story just to be told, and I don't even know how much hope he has at this point.
Right.
And of course they die. They forget him. He's left there still, and so this kind of lands us in this place of him being forgotten, him being passed over. And I think what has resonated with so many people about this is that we've all felt abandoned. We've all felt, maybe not to this level,
right,
but this is kind of what Scripture does. It kind of uses like these extreme cases and pulls them out and says, well, man, I can identify with this. So he's abandoned, forgotten, alone, and then he needs something.
His whole life up to this point we just identify with. This is just a messy family. All of it, right? Like brothers don't like other brothers. There's like a two moms, one dad type situation. There's so many things in the life of Joseph that I think people do resonate with them, because who can't say they haven't been a part of a messed up family, where dad didn't get it right? Jacob stole the birthright from Esau, marries one sister, then has to marry the other sister. There's a sister, one of Joseph's sisters, gets raped. Brothers go murder the whole village. Like, there's just a lot of things. Right?
We think that our families have,
and we think our families
are messed up.
So yeah, like, you just have this. Then you have this person that just, in the midst of all of that, stays true to, like, believing that God is going to do something, or that he still hasn't forgotten him while he's in jail. Like, I don't know what went through Joseph's mind. Like, did he call upon, the God of his great grandfather, like Abraham? Did he have those moments? Did he? I mean, I'm sure he cried. He had to have cried, thinking about his brother Benjamin and his father. And I mean, later on in the story, he requires them to come back, right? Like, he has to bring Benjamin, has to bring his father. Like, these.
You're forgetting somebody.
You're forgetting someone.
And so, like, we land at this spot, and
yeah.
Your first point here is Joseph needed a hero. Like, he needs some kind of redemption, and then, we're kind of setting this up from our New Testament side, looking. You're like, oh my goodness, like, he's setting up. I need a savior. I need someone, and we're kind of viewing it that way. Of course, Joseph is destitute, and he just needs anyone. And here we see, still the Lord's with him.
Right. And I think it's important to say that Joseph needs a hero, because heroes are larger than life, big people, right? Like, they're like, when you go to a movie screen and you see the Avengers, right? You see the Incredible Hulk, like, larger than life Thor from another planet even. Like, they're just huge. And for Joseph, needing a hero meant, like, he needed a God that was going to be big enough to handle it, right? I think I said in that sermon was just like, I don't need, when I'm accused of something, a mediocre God. So in the midst of being accused of rape, he didn't need, a small God, a demigod. He didn't need, when he's forgotten and left alone in prison, he didn't need just a mediocre. It wouldn't do, just like it wouldn't do for us. Mm-hmm. In the moments of feeling alone and helpless and things are out of control and you're grasping at straws, a small God isn't going to cut it. Yeah. It's not going to cut it.
I keep thinking of, like, how many songs there are out there, and they're all good. Just kind of viewing God as our defender, which he is our defender.
Right.
But in this situation, he doesn't need, like, a defense attorney to be like, well, now let me argue my side. Right. He needs someone to come in and, like, level the jail, like, come in and take him, because he's already falsely accused. He doesn't need someone to argue his case. He needs a sweeping flood.
And maybe what we identify with is everything that happened in Joseph's life is completely unfair.
Yeah.
And I didn't say that in the service. But as you think about it, right? Thrown in a pit, minding his own business, sold into slavery, accused when he was just trying to honor his master and do the right thing, even after he fled, right? Throw him in jail, stays in jail, interprets the dreams, does what he is gifted in doing, and still gets forgotten, and he's still there. And all of those things were not things that he deserved in any way, shape, or form. And so, like, he needed a God whose purposes spanned generations for him. That the purpose that God set out for Abraham, his great-great-grandfather, you know what I'm talking about, is just going to see its way through in Joseph's life to keep things going.
Yeah. As we have a little pause as we move forward, favorite superhero? Like, who would you want to come rescue you?
Favorite superhero?
In this, like, I mean, so if you're here, like, I'm thinking I want the Hulk to come in and just level everybody. Like,
everybody. I would like Thor. Mostly because I like Thor more than I like Superman. Like, I think as far as Marvel comics are concerned, he's it.
I think he's better looking.
Yeah,
and I guess it depends on what area you come from. Who has the better hair? So
True.
anyway, sorry. So God, we kind of take a little bit of a transition in the message, and you identified 7 things for Joseph that displays God's power of a word that you kind of defined and talked about as kind of a word that we use in church a lot, and also at like the United Nations, I guess, with other places I would think like
Right.
sovereign nations, like sovereignty. So
Right.
go into that a little bit, like what that is,
So basically, in my book, in the Dictionary of Amber,
which is the only thing that matters
the only
at
thing
this
that matters
moment.
at this moment is, in my opinion, sovereignty means, when I say God's sovereign, I mean God's the boss. He's like the big kahuna, right? Like, he gets to make all of the decisions. He doesn't have to ask our permission. Not really. He just gets to say or give or take away or whatever those things are, right? Like, he just gets to make the decision.
Yeah, and what really bugs me about that, okay, like just as somebody that both of us are believers,
Right.
but
Be honest.
what really bugs me about that is that like the whole idea of sovereignty is that like it's outside of my condition. Like he can choose, like he's not acting inside my condition. Like I'm like hurting right now, but he knows that in a while I won't be hurting, or maybe I'll be hurting worse later or whatever else, and he can act outside of that. And I think a lot of like, parents, I think a lot of, bosses out there, educators, people in the military who have to make decisions that are going to affect people, and the people are not going to necessarily like the outcome of that, but they have to act by just doing the right thing,
right,
and according to character in these things. And I see God doing that as this story kind of plays out, even though Joseph is like, this is the world would say all this is not fair, and God still says, but I still love you.
Right. And he can use, he's looking at all the details.
Yes.
He's looking at the small details and the big details. He kind of can oversee all of it, whereas we're so finite. I can only see really here and now and maybe 2 feet in front of me as to what my life is going to be. We like to think that we know a little bit more. The other thing that I find amazing about God's sovereignty is like, he never takes away our free will in his sovereignty. He, like you're saying, he moves outside of like our present, like where we are right this moment, but never at the detriment of taking away our free will. We can still make decisions, right, that affect our outcome,
Right.
but he still gets to move within that, and he doesn't take that away.
Yeah, and that is like the ultimate. It's the ultimate of giving us what we want and giving us
Right.
this love that he just hands us. But it's so hard to understand. It's very difficult for us in our time and right now to understand that.
Well, and when you are in those moments where you are asking, what the heck is going on? Who's in charge? Why are these things happening, right? The dreaded whys, the dreaded hows. How did this happen? Why is this going on? It's in those moments that you can honestly say, like, I need a hero. And our hero is large enough to handle it, because it's God. It's the God of Joseph. It's the God of Abraham. It's the God that can do these things in our lives, because he's already in it.
Yeah.
Gone before and behind and
that's that whole time thing,
Right.
And so I think we could sit here forever and talk about, like, man, what would that be like to be able to see that far? And man, maybe I don't want to see that far. But God interacts in Joseph's life and enters the scene through a dream. So he gives him like these 2 dreams. And so
he gives Pharaoh 2 dreams.
Pharaoh
Right.
2 dreams, and he gave Joseph dreams earlier.
He
but
did?
but it's weird how he's acting in this story in these dreams, where it's like today, I guess it would be, I don't know, a text message, an email, something like that. But he gives them like this message, but it's in this subconscious, and he does it with Pharaoh and he does it with Joseph, and it's like this time. It's like he gives us this purpose that's inside of both of them that no one else can deny. It's like, you can't tell me what my dream was about. You
Right.
know, like,
So what's really interesting to me is, and I could go back and look, and I might be speaking out of turn, so you can correct me, but he has these dreams, but he doesn't have the interpretation of those dreams.
not yet. Yeah.
He gets the interpretation of Pharaoh's dreams, and he gets the interpretation of the cupbearer and the baker, but he doesn't get the interpretation of his own dream. And I just think that's God's sovereignty too.
Yeah.
Like, that God didn't let Joseph know at a younger age, at 17 when he comes on the scene in the first chapters, of his life, of his story in Genesis. He doesn't get the interpretation for his own life. It has to play out. I may know that I'm called to ministry, right? I may know that I was called to be married, right? That was what was orchestrated for my life, and it has not worked out the way I thought it was. If I interpreted my own, what I thought God was going to do in my life, or how it was going to play out, or all of those things, it hasn't worked out that way.
Yeah.
But I don't think that is the full interpretation yet.
Yeah, and I always wonder, it's like, what would it be like to be an actor versus, you talk to actors that are in movies and things like that, and they're like, wow, this movie was about this. And then we watch the movie and we're like, we get a completely different perspective. It's like God is doing these things and giving us these purposes and causing things to happen in our lives. We call them pivotal circumstances, where we pivot toward God or pivot away from Him, and He's teaching us these things, and other people are watching these things, and they're having a different experience. Like, God is doing and mixing up something else in the lives of all these people. Pharaoh, like other people that are in Joseph's relationship circles, and he's doing something in their lives and doing something in Joseph's life at the same time. But there's two different, one's an actor and one's watching the film, and it's so cool to see all the things that God is doing through, whether He interprets the dreams or gives the answers or doesn't give the answers. He's got a plan for all of it.
And that's where, for my own life, I can say that when I came to that realization, I shared this in the service. People who know me know my story, know how my husband died, in the loss of him through a home invasion. And those moments, all I could cling to is, like, I knew that God, I can say that I knew that God allowed it.
Wow.
I know I can say that. And I'm not saying everyone can say that, or maybe I don't even know if they should say it. But I know for myself, in that hospital that night, I just remember knowing that He allowed, because He can give and He can take away. And my only response was to worship Him in the midst of it, whether He gave or whether He take away, whether He gave me another day or another year or another, whatever with my husband, or He was going to take it away in that moment. My only response was to worship Him.
Yeah. And so it's so interesting for us on the outside of your story, this story of pain, to resist the urge to say, wow, I've been through that. You know what I mean? Like, there's, when people tell stories, you're like, oh, well, there was this time where I, knew, well, this one we can't, because few of us have lost someone as tragically as you have. Few of us, even though we can relate with Joseph, have literally been thrown in a pit by our brothers, who have been left in jail. But out of both of these stories, and how you really did a really great job of, like, equating, like, God is sovereign. Yes, life is not fair. Things are not fair. We're going to have these feelings toward God that, hey, maybe you're not being so fair here. But the overall arcing thing that you're trying to communicate is that heroes are big enough and strong enough to deal with not just our physical problems and get us out of these, or
even if you don't see it, God is working on your behalf. Even if you can't in your life, like, this is probably the biggest thing that I wanted to convey more than anything. Even if you can't see it, even if it doesn't make any sense to you right now, I don't know who I'm talking to, but I just feel like God is working on your behalf. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to fit in the mold you want it to fit into. Doesn't mean it's going to be as perfect as you would have liked it to be, or as easy, or whatever. Like, God's working on your behalf. And I talked about that crack in the door, or like a keyhole where you can look through and you can see parts, but you can't see it all. It's acknowledging that he's working on your behalf that just kind of opens that up and kicks it open. So, like, no matter what's behind the door, you know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that there's a God and he's working to make it.
And he is inviting us into this adventure.
Yeah.
You know, he's inviting us into this, and he said, well, maybe you can only see through parts,
right,
through a keyhole, but one day you'll see in full, and we get eternity and we get all these other things. So what has really resonated with so many people is just the practicality of how we do this, the messiness of like trudging through all of this and saying, okay, God, I'm gonna have feelings sometimes where I don't trust you, but you're calling me to trust you in ways I've never trusted you before. There's people out there that are having to make career decisions, they're having to make parenting decisions, they're having to make life-changing medical decisions for other people that they care about. They're having to make just really difficult decisions. And God is still speaking and working on our behalf and saying, even though this world we're living in is broken and it's not fair, but one day I'm going to bring about like redemption, and all these things will be complete in me. I'll complete all of them. And he even gives Joseph glimpses of this. I mean, he gives him, he reminded the cupbearer about Joseph. He gives some interpretation of dreams. He gives a wise plan in Genesis 41. He moves on Pharaoh's heart to kind of work and choose Joseph in Genesis 41:38. Then he causes years of plenty and famine to come, and so it orchestrates another situation where Joseph can be restored and elevates him to a place of power, and so we're looking all the way through this story, and then he gives them these two sons, and so we've kind of worked our way through this, and this again is all the way through Genesis 40:38 all the way even down into later on in the book. But you gave like these really practical points at the end, and we have just a few minutes left.
Yeah.
But is your God big enough? Like, and we kind of touched on that a second ago, but like, we need a God that is an overwhelming flood, who is incredible fire, who is all-consuming, that can handle our doubts, the accusations of other people, the actions of other people, who can rescue us, not just physically when the time comes for us to be rescued, and he's also calling us to stay in there until he pulls us out of there. How do we do that?
So I think that's where at the end of Joseph, of this story, in Genesis 50, we started there, right? Where you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. That the only way Joseph could say that is he had this realization at this point in his life that God was everywhere, that the sovereignty was in giving Pharaoh dreams to begin with, and the sovereignty was the cupbearer remembering Joseph at just the right time. And that, to get to be able to make that statement is just knowing that God had bigger plans in mind, that God caused the years of plenty and the years of famine, that all of these things happened because God was everywhere in his life, touching everything at just the right time, at just the right moment. All of these things fit into place. And no, they weren't easy. Did it mean 13 years in jail? Did it mean all of these? Yeah, absolutely. Did it mean time spent apart from family? Like, how could that? Is your God big enough? Well, before you can even acknowledge if God is big enough, you have to acknowledge that at the right time, God was working on my behalf. In the midst of a divorce, in the right time, this is happening. In the midst of, the loss of a job or the loss of a child or the struggle of getting pregnant or whatever those things are, that it's all in his right timing.
Yeah.
That in his way, he gets to make the way. And we are just literally staying faithful to the course, staying faithful to the promise, right? And so, is your God big enough?
Yeah. And then,
I think you can only answer that in the moment.
Yeah, and I think it's so, going back to this whole, I need a hero or Incredibles, these incredible, we've been highlighting people that are just like us, that sit near us, that do these incredible things, whether they're in our military or they're teachers or they're first responders or what have you. They just show up right when you need them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we're so, kind of why we've tried to tie these two things together, because you're watching a great movie with a superhero and it's just the last minute and you get rescued off the cliff, and it's like God is just calling us to just work, stay in it, just stay in it a little bit longer, and just to trust him that in the right time,
right,
he's gonna rescue us. He's gonna give us exactly what we need. He's gonna give us our day, in this day, our daily bread, like what we need for this day, and then he's gonna feed us tomorrow, and he's gonna feed us the next day. And that is difficult to do. And then the last point you made under this, kind of like what we can do, how we call it faith with handles, like how do I go and carry this around this week, is that that God is in the details of our everyday life. And you encouraged us to spend time every morning surrendering to sovereignty. And that, I think, is a challenge of challenges, and then giving him the control and saying, I don't know, God, what's going to happen today, but you're working on my behalf. I know that. You're in my corner. When you look at me with grace and
so I'll tell a little personal backstory about where that statement kind of comes from, and why I do it in my life. So at my husband's memorial service, we sang the song "It Is Well," right? The newer version of "It Is Well" by Bethel Music, and I remember, that song is a huge proclamation of being able to say it is well with my soul. And I remember in that moment, sitting in the front row, had my family, have my stepson and his wife, and I remember just kneeling and being able to say, I surrender. I surrender. If this is what you have for my life, you're God, you're big enough, and I'm just going to surrender, and yield to whatever you're going to do from here on out, because I have no idea where you're taking me, where we're going, what we're going to do. And so I try to live. I don't do it well every day. Obviously we always want control, right? We're human beings of control. But I will say that there is such freedom in being able to say, I don't know what today holds. I don't know what tomorrow holds. But I'm going to live today with you at the helm. Like I yield to whatever you're going to do today. If that means I'm 2 hours late because I am talking to someone who just really needs something, or I'm putting my career on hold and going to take care of my family member, or whatever that is, it really is at his discretion.
And sovereignty is us like bending toward him. And it's crazy.
Yeah.
I read this quote this morning. It's by a guy, E. Stanley Jones. He was a missionary in India for years. And he said this: if I throw out a boat hook from the boat and catch a hold of the shore and pull, do I pull the shore to me, or do I pull myself to the shore? And he says, understanding God's will is understanding that I'm not pulling the shore to me. The shore is bending me into it. It's pulling me into that. And I need to realize that I'm throwing a hook and I'm grabbing onto a huge, big God who is in control and is founded and is not bobbing up and down and is steady and can't lie. you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm,
Yeah.
I'm hooking into that, and let me bend into that will rather than, you know, letting all this turmoil in my life control me and
Right.
my emotions. And so, any last words? We need to close up. I've been really enjoyed hanging out with you and just like talking through this and unpacking some of this. Maybe a final thought as we close up.
Final thought. I think if we're going to get to a point where we want to say in our lives that all the things that have happened to us, though we're meant for evil, God means for good, then we have to surrender.
Yeah.
And we have to acknowledge that everything happens at the right time in our lives for a reason, whether we see it or don't see it. So,
Well, thanks again for
Yeah.
hanging out.
this is
And
awesome.
Everybody, thanks for joining us. We'll try and do this again. I think we should
Yeah, we
get
might
you
need
a bit
to
of
do
good
this again.
time. Message us on social media. Let us know if you watch this. Share it. I guess if you listen to this, right? It'll be
Right.
an audio file. You have to watch an audio file now, which is great.
Yeah.
That's an awesome thing to watch now. Maybe we'll put some graphics up there of
Ooh.
like kittens and puppies and things. That would be awesome.
Or
So
not.
anyway, thanks again for joining us. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Have a
Have a
great
great
day.
week.